The Galactic Council chamber fell silent as the human delegation walked through the towering doors. Ambassador Chen led her team of 5 engineers, their simple blue jumpsuits looking plain compared to the elaborate robes and ceremonial armor worn by the other species. The chamber itself was a marvel of ancient construction, built by the Vorathi Empire over 10,000 years ago, and every surface gleamed with polished crystal and rare metals. High Chancellor Zethvar, a tall being with silver scales and 4 arms, gestured for the humans to approach the central platform. His species, the Keithrani, had led the Galactic Council for the past 3 centuries, and they did not hide their doubt about these newcomers from a small blue planet at the edge of explored space. "You have requested an audience to present your case for infrastructure contracts," Zethvar said, his voice carrying through the chamber without need for amplification. "The Council has heard many such requests from young species. We must warn you that our standards are very high, and our current systems have served us well for millennia." Ambassador Chen nodded respectfully. "We understand, High Chancellor. We only ask for the chance to show what human engineering can offer. We believe we can solve problems that have troubled the galaxy for a very long time." A ripple of amusement passed through the assembled delegates. The Vorathi representative, an ancient being whose crystalline body glowed with inner light, spoke with a voice like wind chimes. "Young humans, we have built wonders across 1,000 star systems. Our transit gates connect empires. Our power stations burn the hearts of dead stars. What could you possibly offer that we have not already perfected?" The lead engineer, a woman named Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, stepped forward. She was small compared to most of the aliens present, but she carried herself with quiet confidence. "With respect, honored Vorathi, we have studied your transit gates. They are beautiful and powerful, but they require enormous amounts of energy and can only be built at specific points in space where the fabric of reality is naturally thin." "This is known," the Vorathi said. "It is the nature of space itself. Some limitations cannot be overcome." Sarah smiled. "We thought so too at first, but we found another way." She activated a small holographic projector, and the center of the chamber filled with a 3-dimensional model of a transit gate unlike any the Council had seen. Where the traditional gates were massive rings of metal and crystal, hundreds of kilometers across, this design was compact and modular. It looked almost crude in comparison, made of simple geometric shapes that locked together. "Our gates can be built anywhere," Sarah explained. "They do not need natural weak points in space. They create their own pathways by working together in networks. One gate alone is useless, but connect 10 of them and they can move small cargo ships. Connect 100 and they can move anything the traditional gates can, at 1/10 the energy cost." The chamber erupted in noise. Delegates shouted questions and objections. The Keithrani High Chancellor raised all 4 arms to restore order. "These claims are extraordinary," Zethvar said. "You say you can match the transit gates that took the Vorathi centuries to develop, using what appears to be basic construction materials." "Not match," Sarah said. "Improve. Our system is not just more flexible, it is also self-repairing. If one gate is damaged, the network routes around it automatically, and because each unit is small and simple, they can be manufactured quickly and cheaply." "Impossible," declared Lord Manthos, the representative of the Kalari Dominion. His insectoid features were impossible to read, but his compound eyes reflected the hologram with what seemed like anger. "We have invested trillions in the current gate system. Our empire depends on it. You cannot expect us to believe that a species barely 500 years into space travel has solved problems we could not." Ambassador Chen stepped forward again. "We do not ask you to believe without proof. We ask only for a single test. Give us one failing system, one piece of infrastructure that your engineers cannot fix, and let us try. If we fail, we will trouble the Council no more." The request was bold, perhaps too bold. Sarah watched the delegates confer with each other, their alien languages creating a buzz of conversation that filled the chamber. She had prepared for this moment for years, but now that it was here, she felt the weight of it pressing down on her. The truth was, humans had developed their technology out of necessity. Earth's resources were limited, and they had learned early that waste and inefficiency meant death. Every system they built had to work under harsh conditions, had to be repairable with whatever was on hand, and had to last. This philosophy had shaped human engineering in ways that the wealthy, ancient empires of the galaxy had never needed to consider. After a long discussion, Zethvar turned back to the human delegation. There is one problem that has troubled us for decades. The Nexus Station, our largest trading hub, sits at the intersection of 17 major transit routes. Its power grid is failing, and our engineers estimate that a complete reconstruction will take 20 years and disrupt trade across half the galaxy. He paused, and his expression was unreadable. If you can stabilize the Nexus power grid without shutting it down, we will consider your request for further contracts. Sarah felt her heart race, but she kept her face calm. How long do we have? The next major failure is projected in 3 standard months. You have until then. 3 months to fix a problem that the galaxy's best engineers had struggled with for decades. It was an impossible deadline, and everyone in the chamber knew it. This was not a genuine test. It was a way to dismiss the humans without appearing unfair. But Sarah was already running calculations in her head. She thought about the other 4 engineers on her team, each one brilliant in their own way. She thought about the principles that had guided human engineering since the first person picked up a rock and used it as a tool. Adapt, improvise, never give up. We accept, she said. The journey to Nexus Station took 2 weeks by traditional transit gate. The station itself was a sprawling artificial world, home to over 50 million beings from across the galaxy. It hung in space like a mechanical flower, its petals spread to catch energy from the nearby star, its core pulsing with lights that never dimmed. Dr. Marcus Webb, the team's power systems specialist, pressed his face against the viewport of their ship as they approached. "It's massive," he whispered. "How are we supposed to fix something this big in 3 months?" Sarah stood beside him, studying the station's structure. "We don't fix the whole thing. We find the real problem and solve that. Everything else is just symptoms." The station's docking authority guided them to a small bay on the outer rim, far from the gleaming diplomatic sectors where important visitors were usually received. Their greeting party consisted of a single bored-looking Keithrani official who introduced himself as Administrator Vorn. "The Council has ordered me to give you access to our engineering records," Vorn said, not bothering to hide his disdain. "I am also required to assign a local engineer to assist you, though I cannot imagine what help you might provide. Our teams have studied this problem for 30 years. "We appreciate any assistance," Sarah said politely. "Can we meet this engineer?" Vorn gestured with one arm, and a young Keithrani stepped forward. She was smaller than Vorn, her scales a darker shade of silver, and she carried a data pad clutched in both hands like a shield. "This is Engineer Kira," Vorn said. "She volunteered for this assignment, though I advised against it. Working with the humans will not advance her career." Kira's eyes flickered with something that might have been embarrassment or defiance. "I have studied the station's power grid extensively, Administrator. I believe an outside perspective might reveal something we have missed." Sarah liked her immediately. "Thank you, Kira. Can you show us the main power core?" The journey to the core took them through kilometers of corridors, each one crowded with beings from dozens of species going about their daily business. Shops and restaurants lined the wider passages, and the air carried the mingled scents of 1,000 different worlds. Despite its technical problems, Nexus Station was very much alive. But as they descended toward the engineering levels, signs of trouble became visible. Lights flickered. temperature fluctuated between too hot and too cold. Some doors opened slowly, grinding as if in pain, while others refused to open at all and had to be bypassed. The grid has been unstable for 40 years, Kira explained as they walked. Small failures at first, easily repaired, but the problems grew, and now even simple repairs sometimes cause new failures elsewhere. Our engineers call it cascade syndrome. Fix one thing, break two others. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Sounds like the system has grown too complex. Too many connections, too many dependencies. Change anything and the effects ripple everywhere. That is the theory, Kira said, but we cannot simplify it. Every system depends on every other system. The whole station would have to be rebuilt from the foundation. The power core was a cathedral of technology, a vast chamber filled with humming machines and crackling energy fields. Dozens of engineers moved through the space, monitoring displays and making constant tiny adjustments to keep everything running. Sarah stood at the viewing platform overlooking it all, and she began to see the problem. "It's beautiful," she said, "and that's exactly what's wrong with it." Kira frowned. "I do not understand." The original builders made everything perfect. Every system is optimized for maximum efficiency, but efficiency means no room for error. When something goes wrong, there's no slack to absorb the shock. Sarah pointed to a cluster of power conduits that converged on a single junction. "See those? They all meet at one point. Very elegant, very efficient. But if that junction fails, everything it feeds goes dark." "We know this," Kira said, "but we cannot change the fundamental architecture without shutting down the station for years." Sarah smiled. "Then we don't change the architecture. We add something new on top of it, something that can take the load when the main systems fail and give them time to recover." She turned to her team, her mind already racing with possibilities. "We need to map every critical junction in the station, find the weak points. Then we design a backup network that can handle emergencies." Marcus raised his eyebrows. "In 3 months for a station this size?" "No," Sarah said. "In 2 months. We need a month to test it before the deadline." The work began immediately, and it was harder than anything any of them had ever attempted. Sarah's team split up, each engineer taking a different section of the station to analyze. They worked 20-hour days, sleeping in shifts, eating whatever quick meals the station's vendors would sell them. Kira proved invaluable. She knew every corridor, every access hatch, every quirk of the station's ancient systems. She also knew the other Keithrani engineers, and though many of them treated the humans with open skepticism, a few were willing to share information that was not in the official records. "Your people do not work like our engineers," Kira observed one night, watching Sarah sketch out a new design on a portable display. "Our teams follow protocols. They check every calculation against established standards. You just try things." Sarah laughed softly. "We don't have 10,000 years of standards to follow. We have to make it up as we go. Sometimes that means we make mistakes, but it also means we can move faster." "Is that not dangerous?" "Very. That's why we test everything before we trust it. But the testing is part of the process, not something we do after we think we're finished." By the end of the first month, the team had mapped almost all of the station's critical systems. The picture they assembled was grim. The power grid was not just failing. It was caught in a slow-motion collapse that had been building for decades. Every repair the Keithrani engineers made was like putting a bandage on a growing wound. The underlying problems remained, and they were getting worse. "If we do nothing, the station will experience a catastrophic failure within 2 years, Marcus reported during their nightly team meeting. "Not just power loss, full structural collapse. The whole thing will tear itself apart." The team absorbed this in silence. They had come here to fix a power grid, but the real problem was much bigger than anyone had told them. "Does the council know?" asked Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the team's materials specialist. They must, Sarah said, which means they didn't give us an impossible task just to get rid of us. They gave us an impossible task because they're desperate. She stood up and began to pace, her mind working through the implications. They need a miracle, but they can't admit it. Admitting that the great empires of the galaxy can't solve their own problems would be a political disaster. So they bring in the new species, the ones nobody takes seriously, and they hope we either succeed or give them someone to blame when everything falls apart. Then we succeed, said Dr. James Oduya, the team's structural engineer. His deep voice carried absolute conviction. We came here to show what humans can do. Let's show them. The next 2 months were a blur of activity. Sarah's original plan for a backup power network evolved into something much more ambitious, a complete redesign of how the station managed its energy flow. Instead of the elegant but fragile system the Vorathi had built, they would create something messy and redundant and almost impossible to break. They called it the web. It was a network of small power units, each one capable of storing and distributing energy independently. The units communicated with each other constantly, sharing load, predicting failures, and rerouting power automatically. No single point of failure, no elegant beauty, just raw, stubborn reliability. Building it required materials the station didn't have, so Sarah negotiated with the traders in the commercial sectors. Many of them owed favors to Kira, or were simply curious about the strange humans who were working so hard on something everyone assumed was doomed to fail. Piece by piece, the team gathered what they needed. Installing the web was even harder than designing it. The team worked in the most dangerous sections of the station, often in spaces so cramped that only a human could fit. The Keithrani engineers watched with a mixture of horror and fascination as Sarah and her team crawled through maintenance tunnels, jury-rigged connections with improvised tools, and performed tasks that would have been considered violations of a dozen safety protocols. "Your methods are highly irregular," Vorn said during one of his increasingly frequent visits to observe their progress. "If any of you are injured, the Council will not be responsible." "Understood," Sarah said, not looking up from the power unit she was calibrating. "We take responsibility for ourselves." "I do not understand why you take such risks for a station that is not even yours. You have no stake in its survival." Sarah did look up then, meeting the administrator's eyes. "Every person on this station has a stake in its survival. 50 million lives, Administrator. That's why we're here." Vorn had no response to that. On the night before the deadline, the team gathered in the small quarters they had been assigned. They were exhausted, covered in grime and burns from their work, but there was a spark of hope in their eyes. "The web is online," Marcus reported. "All 800 units are connected and talking to each other. The simulation shows it can handle any single-point failure in the main grid." "Any single-point failure," Yuki repeated. "But the grid has multiple failures every day." "I know, but the web learns. Every failure teaches it something new. Give it a month and it will be able to handle anything." Sarah nodded slowly. "Then we've done everything we can. Tomorrow we find out if it's enough." The testing began at dawn, station time. Sarah and her team stood in the main power core control room, surrounded by Keithrani engineers and council observers who had arrived specifically to witness what everyone assumed would be a spectacular failure. Administrator Vorn operated the main console, his 4 hands moving across the controls with practiced ease. "We will begin with a simulated failure of Junction 7 Alpha," he announced. "This junction feeds power to the central commercial district. In normal operations, its failure would cause a cascade affecting approximately 12% of the station." He pressed a control, and Junction 7 Alpha went dark. For a moment, nothing happened. The lights in the control room flickered, and several displays showed warning messages. Then the web activated. All across the station, the small power units that Sarah's team had installed began to work together. Energy flowed through new pathways, bypassing the failed junction. The flickering stopped. The warning messages faded. Within 30 seconds, the station had stabilized. The control room was utterly silent. "That should not have worked," Vorn said slowly. "Try another failure," Sarah said. "Something bigger." Vorn's hands hesitated over the console, then moved with new purpose. "Junction 12 Gamma. This one feeds the water recycling plants for the residential sectors. A failure here would affect 40% of the station." Junction 12 Gamma died, and again the web responded. Power flowed, systems adjusted, and the station kept running. For the next 3 hours, Vorn simulated failure after failure. He shut down junctions that had been protected since the station was built. He created cascading failures that should have triggered station-wide emergencies. Each time, the web adapted and compensated. Finally, Vorn turned to face the human team. His expression was unreadable, but his voice was softer than Sarah had ever heard it. "We underestimated you. We all underestimated you." Kira stepped forward, her data pad forgotten in her hands. "The web is remarkable, but I do not understand how it works. Our systems are designed with fixed protocols. Yours seem to think." Sarah smiled. "Not exactly think, but each unit in the web makes decisions based on what it sees. Good decisions get rewarded. Bad decisions get corrected. Over time, the whole system gets smarter." "Adaptive learning," Kira said, her eyes widening. "We use this for some research applications, but never for infrastructure. It was considered too unpredictable." "Unpredictable can be good," Sarah said. "Life is unpredictable. Systems that can only handle expected problems will always fail eventually, but systems that can learn to handle unexpected problems, they can last forever," Kira finished. The council received the news of the successful test with a mixture of relief and concern. Sarah and her team were summoned back to the great chamber where their journey had begun, but this time the atmosphere was very different. The delegates no longer looked amused or dismissive. They looked worried. High Chancellor Zethvar addressed them directly. "You have accomplished what we said could not be done. The Council acknowledges this achievement. However, we must now discuss the implications." Lord Manthos leaned forward in his seat. "Your web system has saved Nexus Station, but it has also demonstrated a troubling capability. Adaptive infrastructure could be revolutionary, but it could also be dangerous. What if your system adapts in ways you do not intend? What if it learns the wrong lessons?" Sarah had expected this objection. The web has safeguards, hard limits that cannot be changed by adaptation, but more importantly, the system only learns within the scope of its purpose. It learns how to manage power, not how to do anything else. And if it learns to manage power in ways that harm us, then humans remain responsible for it. We don't build systems and walk away. We stay, we maintain, we correct. That's the other half of human engineering. We never assume anything is finished. The Vorathi representative chimed softly. "This philosophy is foreign to us. Our greatest achievements are those that function without intervention. We consider it a failure if our creations require ongoing care." "Maybe that's why they're failing now," Sarah said, and immediately regretted her bluntness. But the Vorathi did not seem offended. "Perhaps," the crystalline being admitted, "perhaps we have been too proud. We built for eternity, but eternity has a way of finding new problems to create." Zethvar raised one hand for silence. "The Council will deliberate on this matter. In the meantime, the human delegation will remain on Nexus Station to oversee the web's continued operation. You will receive full engineering credentials and access to all relevant systems." He paused, then added, "And you will receive compensation appropriate to your contributions." It was more than Sarah had dared to hope for. Not just a contract, but recognition, acceptance. The first step toward humanity taking its place among the great civilizations of the galaxy. Over the following months, the web proved itself again and again. Power failures that would once have caused hours of disruption were resolved in seconds. The station's systems became more stable than they had been in living memory. And slowly, the engineers who had been skeptical began to approach the human team with questions. How did you design the learning algorithms? Where did you get the idea for distributed decision-making? Can you teach us? Sarah answered every question. She shared every technique. She had no interest in keeping secrets. The whole point of human engineering was that it worked better when more minds contributed to it. Kira became the first alien graduate of what the team informally called Human Engineering 101. She mastered the principles of adaptive design faster than anyone expected, and she began training other Keithrani engineers in turn. Within a year, there were hundreds of them, and the philosophy was spreading to other species as well. You've started something, Ambassador Chen told Sarah during a rare visit to the station. The Council is receiving requests from dozens of systems. They all want human engineers to help modernize their infrastructure. We can't handle that many projects, Sarah said, not with our small team. Then train more, partner with locals like you did with Kira, spread the knowledge. That's what you're good at, isn't it? Not just solving problems, but teaching others how to solve them. Sarah thought about it for a long time after Chen left. The ambassador was right. Humans had never been the strongest species or the fastest or the longest lived, but they had always been teachers. Every generation passed on what it knew to the next and added something new. That was how they had survived. That was how they had reached the stars. Maybe that was what they had to offer the galaxy. She found Kira in the power core control room, supervising the night shift. I need your help with something, Sarah said. Kira turned, her expression curious. Of course, what do you need? I want to start an engineering academy, open to all species, not just teaching human techniques but learning from everyone, a place where we can all get better together. Kira's eyes brightened. The Council would never approve such a thing. It would challenge too many established interests. I know, so we don't ask the Council. We start small here on Nexus Station. We train whoever wants to learn. We let the results speak for themselves. That is very irregular, Kira said. Then she smiled, an expression Sarah had learned to recognize. But as you taught me, irregular can be good. They started with a single classroom, a converted storage bay in the engineering levels. Their first students were 32 engineers from 12 different species, all of them young, all of them curious, all of them frustrated with the rigid hierarchies that dominated their professions. Sarah taught them about adaptive design. Marcus explained power systems that could heal themselves. Yuki demonstrated materials that could change their properties based on need. James showed them how to build structures that bent instead of breaking. And in return, the students taught the humans. The Vorathi shared their secrets of crystal-based computing. The Kalari explained their remarkable techniques for thermal management. The Tandri, a species of aquatic beings, offered insights into fluid dynamics that no human had ever considered. The academy grew, more students arrived, more knowledge was shared, and slowly something remarkable began to happen. New designs emerged from the academy that no single species could have created alone. Power systems that combined human adaptability with Vorathi precision. Structures that merged Kalari efficiency with human redundancy. Communications networks that used principles borrowed from a dozen different civilizations. The Council could not ignore it. Within 3 years, the Nexus Academy had produced more innovations than the established engineering guilds had managed in the previous century. The old powers grumbled, but they could not argue with results. High Chancellor Zethvar visited the academy personally, something that would have been unthinkable just a few years earlier. Sarah showed him around, explaining the various projects and introducing him to students from across the galaxy. You have created something unprecedented, Zethvar said at the end of the tour. A place where species who were once rivals now work together as colleagues. Engineering doesn't care about species, Sarah said. Problems don't care either. They just need solutions. And you believe humans are uniquely suited to find these solutions. Sarah shook her head. No, I believe everyone is suited to find solutions if they're given the chance to try. Humans are just good at making sure everyone gets that chance. Zethvar was quiet for a long moment. Then he made a gesture that Sarah did not recognize, something that might have been a Keith-Ronnie sign of respect. The council has a proposal, he said. We want to establish academies like this one across the galaxy. Centers of learning where knowledge flows freely and innovation is encouraged. We would like you to lead this initiative. Me, I'm just an engineer. You are an engineer who solved a problem we thought was unsolvable. You are a teacher who has inspired a generation of new thinkers. And you are a human, which means you understand something that we ancient species have forgotten, that wisdom grows best when it is shared. Sarah looked around the academy, at the students bent over their projects, at the instructors arguing good-naturedly about design principles, at the impossible mix of species all working toward common goals. She thought about Earth, about the small blue planet where her ancestors had first learned to build and create and dream. I would be honored, she said. The first new academy opened on the Kalari homeworld, in a region that had been scarred by an industrial accident centuries ago. Human engineers worked alongside Kalari specialists to design a facility that would both train new engineers and help heal the damaged land. The second opened in Vorathi space, at the heart of their ancient crystal cities. Sarah was nervous about this one. The Vorathi were proud of their traditions, and many of them resented the implication that they needed to learn anything from younger species. But the academy thrived. Young Vorathi who had felt stifled by the rigid requirements of their guild system flocked to study there. They learned human techniques for rapid prototyping and iterative design. They taught their alien classmates the elegant mathematics that underlay all Vorathi engineering. More academies followed. Each one was different, shaped by the culture and needs of its host world. But they all shared the same core principles: open knowledge, collaborative problem-solving, and respect for every species' contributions. The transformation was slow at first, barely noticeable against the vast scale of galactic civilization. But it built momentum. Engineers trained at the academies brought their new skills back to their homeworlds. They solved problems that had frustrated their predecessors for generations. They built infrastructure that was not just functional but adaptable, not just efficient but resilient. Nexus Station became a symbol of what was possible. 20 years after Sarah and her team had first arrived, the station was unrecognizable. Its power grid had been completely rebuilt using principles developed at the Academy. Its transportation systems had been upgraded with technologies that merged human ingenuity with Kalari precision and Vorathi elegance. And everywhere you looked, you saw the true legacy of human engineering, not just the machines and structures, but the people. Engineers from every species working together. Students teaching students. Problems being solved not by a single genius, but by teams that drew on the wisdom of the entire galaxy. Sarah was older now, her hair gray, her hands a little slower. But she still taught classes at the original academy. She still walked through the corridors of Nexus Station, marveling at how far they had come. "You changed everything," Kira told her one evening. They sat on an observation deck, watching ships come and go through the transit gates. Kira was no longer young either. She had become one of the most respected engineers in the galaxy, a leader of the Academy movement. "We changed everything," Sarah corrected. "You, me, every student who ever walked through those doors. That was the whole point. No one species can save the galaxy, but together we can do anything." A new ship was arriving, bearing the insignia of a species Sarah didn't recognize. New to the galactic community, probably, still learning their place among the stars. "I should go greet them," Sarah said, rising from her seat. "They'll have questions, they'll be confused, they'll need someone to show them around." Kira smiled. "And you want to be the one to tell them they can do anything." "Somebody has to, might as well be me." She walked toward the docking bay, ready to welcome the newcomers, ready to share everything she knew. Because that was what humans did. That was what they had always done. They taught, they shared, they believed. And the galaxy was better for it.